Today I'm looking at 3 of my Alesis ModFx desktop effects units. There were other ones made as well that I do not own, such as the vocoder and the compressor one. There are 1 or 2 other ones as well, I forget which ones they are, but I do not own those. The ones I own here are the Phlngr, the tremolo/auto panner, and this one, which is like a bit reduction, sort of like just a multi-effect kind of weird thing. So I'll go into detail on each one of these. But yeah, these came out many years ago. I originally started with the Bitrman, which is what this one's called, and then I eventually got the Phlngr, and then finally I got this one right here, the Ampliton. And these were cool. One thing I really liked about these particular effects was that on the side you could chain them together without having to use any external cables. And I really liked that because at the time, and even now, I mean, obviously my studio is covered in cables, so this was a cool way to have multiple effects set up and chain them together, but without having like a ton of cables to add onto it, especially if you're using like a desktop setup like these, as opposed to being on the floor. The cables are just going to get really messy, even if they're running out the back. It's like, okay. Another thing I like about this way of chaining them together is that you can mess around with the order that they go in. So without having to like disconnect all the cables in the back and reorder them, you just simply unplug them and plug them in the order you want them to go in. So for instance, if you wanted the Bitrman to go first, then the Phlngr, you just, plug them in the order you want them to go. The signal path starts with this one and then goes from left to right. So whatever the last one in the chain is, you'll use those outputs to send to your mixer or your amp or whatever. But yeah, you will obviously have to use cables, but only on the input and the output when you're chaining them together. So yeah, like that, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to say, oh, you know what, I really want the tremolo and the auto panner in the middle, so you just disconnect it like that, take it over here, plug it in, plug that in there. And obviously, if the output is coming out of there, if you have it at the end of the chain, you do have to obviously unplug that and then plug it into this, which will now be at the end. But that's not bad, considering it's just, a lot less cables is basically what that helps out with. But it doesn't eliminate all the cables, but it does help. So it's not as messy. So yeah, that's a pretty cool way of sending the signal path through multiple mod effects. Again, I only own 3 of these, but if you had more of them, I'm sure this would be way more exciting than just running it through these 3. But this is pretty cool for now. Like, I have had a lot of fun running synths and drum machines and all different types of stuff through these. I've run vocals through them for cool effects in real time. It's really fun to play with. Some other things that I wanted to talk about with these is the overall feel for them is very plasticky. It's very, very cheaply made. These are not metal parts. All of these things I'm touching here, all of this is plastic, and very, very cheap plastic at that. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about the build quality that I like is that these knobs have a sort of rubber coating on the side. On the top, it's just plastic, but on the side of them, they all have this sort of they all have like a rubber coating, so that when you're turning it, it's actually really nice to turn. You don't feel like your fingers are slipping. You can have a decent amount of control over these knobs. And all of the ModFx units have this rubber coating on the side. It's not super easy to see, but yeah, you can see the difference between the plasticky cover and then where it goes into the rubber. So that's pretty cool. But unfortunately, everything about the build quality... and the other thing that's cool is these rubber bottoms too, which keeps it from slipping. But yeah, as you might have heard when I just turned that over, the other bad thing about the build quality is that even with these being on a table and not ever being used live or being toured or anything like that, there's like washers and screws that have kind of fallen into this thing that have just kind of fallen apart inside, but I barely ever take this thing off the table. So you can kind of hear it. I'll shake it in front of the mic. It's like I don't know what happened in there. And the weird thing is, again, they all just sit on a synth or a table. I barely ever move them. They just sit there. So I don't know. It's obviously just cheaply made. But it's not just the Bitrman. The Phlngr does it as well. There's all kinds of stuff rattling around in there. Never dropped it. Never treated it bad. It's only just sat on a table. So I can only just assume that maybe there was just some kind of bad, cheaply used parts that just fell apart, or whatever the design they had didn't work out. Aside from whatever's going on the inside there, the other problem I had is all three of these units have a problem where these buttons here are supposed to be stiff. This one right here is stiff, and it clicks when you go up or down, and it's very stiff. There's no play in this toggle switch here. But over here you can see it still does the click, but there's a lot of play in that, and it's whatever kept it stable has since just fallen into whatever the machine is. It probably is one of the things rattling around in the inside. And again, this is the case on all of these units. Like on the Bitrman, it's just this left one. On the Phlngr, it's this left one. It's really bad on this one. You can see there's a lot of play on that. And again, you still hit the button that it connects to, but all that play in between is kind of annoying, considering, when you see how stiff the ones that work are, it's like, okay, it's supposed to feel like that. Not the easiest thing to convey in a video, but you can kind of see how bad the play is on that one compared to like this. So yeah, much like the Bitrman one, the one on the right side is not bad. There's a little bit of play on this one, but not as much as this one right here. That one is a lot. So the left ones are bad. And then the auto panner one doesn't really have that problem, but I can sort of feel the left one going. So it might just be a problem with the left side. I don't know, that's weird. All right, so just walking you through some of the basic features of these effects units. Each one of these effects tries to be fairly deep in the options available, which makes sense if it's going to be a desktop effects unit and handle, especially in the case of the Bitrman, some kind of experimental version of approaching something. So the auto panner and the tremolo one is definitely a more basic effect. It's nothing crazy in there. If anything, I originally bought this to use with my guitar, just as a tremolo. And it was really cool to use. I did, in fact, wind up using it on everything else with synths and vocals and things like that. The Phlngr is very experimental, has a lot of interesting things that I had never really seen on a Phlngr up until this point, like tap tempo for using tempo sync and all kinds of different things. But yeah, very experimental overall approaches to these different effects. They all have the same form factor, where there's 4 knobs and a bypass switch in the middle. Some of them do have a couple of buttons in the middle, and in the case of both of these, they both have some type of tap tempo where you can use it with the tempo sync. So you would go in the case of this one, or actually, yeah, in both of these cases, you go to tempo sync and use the tap tempo for that. And then over here, it's just in the modulation, you go down to tempo sync and you use it like that. I have to be honest, a lot of times when I used it, it didn't always sound like it was doing the best job syncing. It would be kind of cool, but it wasn't like this amazing latching on kind of thing. But it was okay. Out of all three of these ModFx units, by far my favorite is the Bitrman. The Bitrman was really cool. It was the first one I bought. I originally got it just because I knew that I could immediately use it on both drums and synths, which I really liked. Whereas with these ones, I originally thought, oh, this would probably only work good with a guitar, and this would probably only work good with a synth, or vice versa. Whereas, I understand now they work well with everything. They're just kind of a fun all-around toy for effects. But the Bitrman, It was an interesting effect that they tried to do. It definitely has more of an all-in-one type appeal as opposed to these, where this just focuses on a flanger and this focuses on, admittedly this does too, the auto panner and the tremolo, but they're very basic, similar type effects. It's not like this is a reverb and this is the chorus. They're kind of doing similar things, but in different ways. This one is definitely more experimental in the sense that the first knob is for compression, and then you have a second knob for distortion, which is kind of cool. And then you have what is called a dual phaser, or phasor, because of the way they spell it. So I'm guessing, yeah, it's just a dual phaser, which is interesting. And bitterness. And this bitterness knob corresponds to the bitterness toggle switch up here. So you can have comb, decimator, bit reducer, FM, ring mod, and frequency shift. And the effects are pretty cool. I love how it sounds. It definitely has a very, and this goes for all three of these effects, they all have a very, very digital sound. There's nothing analog sounding or warm about these. They're very digital sounding and very bright sounding. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like obviously if you're looking for where things are going to sit in the mix, or if you're looking for a specific sound, in my opinion, obviously somebody might disagree with me, but just in my opinion, these are very, very digital, bright kind of sounding effects units. That said, I really dig the way they laid it out. I thought it was kind of cool that they, over here on the left, had the ability to change the order of the effects, the compression, the distortion, the phaser, and the bitterness. So you can have the bitterness at the beginning, you can have it in here, you can take the compression and put it at the end, and you can do that by, you can see the numbers here. And I feel like they messed up, because I know it's a design aesthetic that they're going for, but each knob has what it says it is. Compressor 1, distortion 2, the phaser's 3, and then you get to bitterness, and there's nothing next to it. So you're like, okay, it's 4, right? Well, like, no, and like, it's like, okay, what is it, 8? And like, no, it's B for bitterness. Why not just have it be 4? Why is it gotta be B? Like, I get why they did it. I know it's a design thing, like an aesthetic or whatever they were going for. But 1, 2, 3, B, and especially when it looks like an 8. Sorry, I should have put that closer. So yeah, you kind of get what I'm saying here. It's like, so obviously I figured that out eventually, but the first few times I used it, I kept desperately trying to see if I was missing something where there was a number 8, and I was like, yeah, okay, well, clearly there's not, so I just messed up and realized one day, oh yeah, it's B for bitterness. And therefore, again, that would just mean that B, if that's lit up, then yeah, bitterness is going to be first in the chain, then it's going to go to the dual phaser, which is 3, then it goes to the distortion, which is 2, then it goes to compression, which is 1, and then there's all these combinations of that. And yeah, that was the other weird thing about their design choices, is they put a lot of these things where they lined up with other written stuff, like the distortion. The 1 is right on the D, and it's like kind of messed up. And they do it over here too, with the frequency shift right pressed up against the phaser, just barely any room. It's like, okay. So this definitely goes for all of them. There's another one there where you can see an example of the font being a little too close for comfort. Again, I get it. It's like a cheap effect. These were not expensive. I can't actually remember how much I paid for these. They were not expensive though. I did buy them new. So it wasn't like I bought these used and they already had this problem with the shaking and, the weird parts on the inside shaking around. That's definitely something that just happened over time. Again, they had a whole bunch of other ones that I don't own. I really would like to eventually get the vocoder one and some of the other ones that they made. But I think overall I'm just going to kind of keep these 3 and if I ever see the vocoder one come down in price, it's fairly expensive used, but if it ever comes down, I might grab one of those. That looks kind of cool, and I would like to have it in my collection. But I think because of the build quality of these and how it just seems to be falling apart, even just sitting still, I wouldn't rush to get another one, let's put it that way. But I'm glad I've had them for years, and I've used them on a lot of different projects. I have a Korg Poly 800 that I love to run these into these effects units because it has a flat surface on the synth, and these sit really just perfectly on it, and it makes it so that I can just have some real-time effects for the synth. And again, they're great for drums as well. You can get a lot of cool real-time effects, as well as these are really, really useful if anybody likes to do this type of stuff live. If you really like doing your effects in real time, this is definitely a great tool to play with. They're very user friendly as far as the sound you're going for if you're trying to manipulate in real time. On the back, your outputs are, you have this trim, or your gain essentially. Input is left and right, or mono if you just use the left. And then you have stereo output, and you have a foot switch. So you technically can use this with a guitar. I mean, you're not gonna use it as a foot pedal. I mean, obviously, if you're not wearing, even with shoes, you can technically use your foot to turn this on and off, but I don't recommend it because you'll be kicking this, and I've tried it once, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna break it, so I never did it again. But I did use the foot switch, and it was perfect. You just, you can put this on a table, or you can even mount it. It has a little you can put that on a tripod and screw it onto whatever you want, and just have a foot switch going to your your connection to that. And then when you're playing guitar or whatever you want to use it for, the foot switch will turn it on, and that way you don't have to hit the bypass button manually, and that's really fun. There is no MIDI. It doesn't run on batteries. It only runs on a power supply. And yeah, I bet if these came out like these days, this is definitely the type of thing that I could see them putting 4 AA batteries would be in it. But I think there probably wasn't enough room, considering the form factor and what they were going for and the circuitry inside of it. But yeah, we've got these rubber pads, keep it from slipping around. And yeah, and then they all say what they are at the bottom. ModFx. And yeah, just to take you through some of these flanger settings, on the left side over here, you can see it has stereo, contrary stereo, async stereo, through zero, and deep mono. I use the deep mono one a lot. That one's really cool. And then over here, the different modulations, triangle, hyper triangle. Oh yeah, you gotta have that hyper triangle. Triggered, uncertainty, pattern, and once again the tempo sync. So you go over here and you would tap in your tempo. You can reset the modulation, and then the different knobs for controlling the flanger, rain, rate, depth. You got all your standard chorus stuff. And that's the chorus. Basically, there's nothing to it. You get your standard flanger effects. And yeah, again, it's really cool. It's really versatile, and it's got a lot of cool things going on. But I really think the Bitrman is the one that shines the most as far as what I think this series was trying to be about, and what Alesis was going for not just making another basic effects. So, this one's cool, again, but it's kind of boring for what it is. They tried, they did a lot of cool stuff. The flanger, it's definitely more interesting than this one. They did a little bit more. They approached it in a bit more experimental way. I appreciate that. But then this one, I feel like if they approached all of them the way they approached this one, I think the series would have been much more interesting, and I probably would have had to have purchased all of them at that point. That said, I don't own the other ones that are available, again, like the vocoder one and the compressor one, but for the ones that I have here, and from what I've seen, the other ones that I don't own, for what they do, this one seems like the most interesting. So yeah, anyways, what I'm trying to say is if you buy one, the Bitrman is the cooler one. So yeah, next up we'll do some audio examples. We'll run it through some synths and some drums, and that way you can kind of hear how these different effects units sound.